Last week, Florida State came out and they said that they're building or basically going to be purchasing a medical facility there that's supposed to be helping them build up their research and development. That's one of the things that the Big Ten really, as you know more than I do, the Big Ten really leans into what the research and development type things the universities really lean into, like AAU certification. For them to be inviting you to the club, you have to do those research things. And so that's what Florida State's starting on that road to say, hey, look at us. We'd like to be considered for the Big Ten. But I don't think, unless something was to change and we got a big announcement of some sort in July or August, I would be surprised if we hear anything for the 26-27 timeframe. If anything, right now, I think everybody's shooting for 27-28. And that's roughly the 27-month time period that it takes to get out of a conference and then to move to a new one. These things take time, and the transitions take a long time to sort out. You have to get all the organizational stuff taken care of. I know BYU just went through this, and they're a private school. They basically could do turnkey with everything they own, but it still took a lot of effort to get into the Big 12 and everything that happens that way. So I think Florida State. Now, North Carolina is the other one that's sort of been the hot button. They are pushing extremely hard from an administration standpoint to be the one that is picked next. They may be. I don't have any indication that's not going to happen, but I do have some concerns. Their football viewership is not fantastic. It was 6th or 7th in the ACC over the last 5 years. That's not screaming. Georgia Tech came in at number 4, which is, we're talking hundreds of millions of viewers, and that affects what your value is if you're going to be moving from one conference to another. So I think they got some stuff to get done if they're going to be the first ones picked.
Hey, Nathan, back to this research center being built and developed there at Florida State. Do you have any idea as to whether the football approach, the football goal, had anything to do with that? And I guess if it gets built, it doesn't matter. The only reason I'm asking that is, would a university go to that length to make a move that would affect the academics?
I believe it does. Yeah, I think they want to. I put it this way: when Miami got AAU, that was a tip of the hat towards working with Notre Dame. Notre Dame, they do a lot of the similar things that Miami does, and in that way, they could be immediately turnkey and taken into a conference like the Big Ten. The SEC doesn't care about that. The SEC is not looking for research dollars. They don't want you to bring in a massive endowment and then throw it in. You add your personal educational processes to what is the academic alliance that the Big Ten has. I can't remember the name of that, but they share all this medical and research information back and forth between them. And it's one of the largest organizations of that type in the world. So I do believe it makes a difference. Now, is that the only reason? Could you draw a straight line from purchasing or incorporating this medical center and get it directly lined to the Big Ten? I don't know if we could draw a direct line to do that, but I can say if they're not doing it, it's not helping them at all. So them at least starting down that road could give them another leg to move up and get over to the Big Ten. Did I lose you? Am I
Sorry about that. That's my bad.
That's okay.
Trying to drown out this construction going on outside, so I'm muting myself. That would be the AAU that the Big Ten's schools are affiliated with, and I don't remember I can't remember the acronym words.
Yeah, I would have to look. Anyway, I would have to look it up. Big Ten.
I've only seen it about 1,400 times in my life.
I know Big Ten Academic Alliance is what it's called, and yeah, it includes all the new schools, including Nebraska, which Nebraska was kicked out of AAU, but they're still in the Academic Alliance. And it's a huge deal because there are some schools that aren't even participating in athletics that are a part of that. I believe Johns Hopkins is one of the schools. I don't have the full list here in front of me, but I know it matters quite a bit to those different universities to be included in that group.
Yeah, Rock and Rant brings up the hiring of Frank Reich at Stanford as interim head coach for 2025. And of course, Frank Reich is a qualified NFL head coach, let
Yes,
alone
sure.
for Stanford.
Right.
So you can take this one on, Nathan, or I was going to segue it into a larger discussion, which is schools making different decisions than they normally would about coaches, about schedules, about all sorts of things. We just brought up the Florida State situation because they're trying to position themselves for a better conference situation going
Right.
forward.
Oh, I think Stanford's definitely doing that. Bringing Andrew Luck in and saying basically get us to where we want to be. I think Stanford's on that roll now. They're now spending money. They've created now an NIL organization that they weren't really using before to bring in and keep and retain the best athletes that they can possibly bring in. Frank Reich, from what I understand, that's a 1 year rental, right? He's getting a 1 year term to go in and either prove that he could be the coach full time, or we'll buy them the time that Andrew Luck needs to actually find the next coach, the 2026 coach at Stanford. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that all the decisions that Stanford's making are built around not staying in the ACC. They can see the writing on the wall. They can see the ACC's now on a timer, roughly 2030, and they want to put themselves in a better position to be accepted someplace. At the end of the day, they're going to need some help to get into an organization like the Big Ten. But let's assume that Stanford in the next 3 years wins the ACC twice and really just blows the doors off their basketball recruiting, and they go out and they make a Sweet 16 or two. If that was to happen in 2 or 3 years, how much more attractive would they be to a Big Ten? I would argue it would be very attractive. So they have to be thinking long term. These are not decisions or actions that are for the short term at all.
At the time that this all started to fall apart and realign, starting with Oklahoma, Texas, then
Right.
USC, UCLA, I certainly put together a number of models that included Stanford going to the Big Ten.
Right.
I know that the football team is a joke, and the program's been a joke with three consecutive 3-9 seasons and all of that. But all you have to do is rewind 10 years,
Yep.
and you're looking at one of the best football programs in the country for a good 7 to 8 year run.
Yeah.
So if and with the academics are obviously a slam dunk, and the Big Ten would love to take on the academics, the endowment, all the prestige that goes along with that. If they just had a functional football program.
I think there's that. There's also this idea that Stanford doesn't necessarily want to share all their academic alliance information. That they have their own in California. They're part of their own system, and there is talk about them how those two could work together. But at this point now, we're at a point where the consolidation is happening in Israel. It's not going away. We're not bringing in more power conferences. In fact, there'll probably be less over the next 10 to 15 years. In that case, if Stanford has to make a decision, they're either going to invest the money that it takes to build up the facilities, increase their coaching capability, pay the most they can in NIL and profit sharing, to all these things that players now look for. That's the only way you're going to compete. That's the only way you're going to be on the top page and bill of any sporting news. And I think they made a decision when they hired Andrew Luck. They said, yeah, we're going to go down this road and we were going to spend the money to do it.
Our guy 5Adam, basically, if I can find the comment again, he's basically looking at this situation with Florida State and joining another conference as a fan. And that's
Right.
fine. You are a fan.
Yep.
But let's understand the dollars and cents just make no sense for Florida State to join the Big 12 unless they have to.
Yes, right. Right. Unless they're forced to. And for some reason, the Big Ten and the SEC say, no, not at this time. We're going to go for another 10 years before we do another reorganization. that could happen. It's not out of the realm of reason that it could happen. There are schools that you could point to that say they're higher on the list. Georgia Tech, from an academic standpoint, is near the top of any list that you could bring in for just academics, right? And they're spending money to make their athletics just as good, certainly in football. I think you could say that for several schools in the ACC. Stanford, Cal being another two. At the end of the day, these guys want to go to it's a club, everybody. Everybody wants to be considered at the top table. And right now, that club is two. It's the SEC and the Big Ten. And I don't think that is going to be changing anytime soon.
What is the best case scenario for the Big 12? Because Five Adam does bring it up that, uh, there was a time here in the last 12 to 15 months where it looked much more favorable for a Florida State to join the Big Ten or the SEC. That's
Right.
what they were certainly pushing for. I think most of us felt as though, wow, when a conference and two of its marquee programs go to court and there are lawsuits flying back and forth, that's probably going to be the result. They're gone.
Right.
But they mended ways, at least for the time being. Uh, and we heard some reports, and you are so much further ahead on this than I am. But I remember producing a video off of some reports that were communicated by probably Ross Dellinger and others regarding what anonymous administrators and athletic directors in the Big Ten were saying about Florida State, and it wasn't too favorable.
Right. Right.
And so if
Yeah.
they, maybe the Big 12 can somehow catch one or two of these powers and make it a much more interesting college football landscape.
Hey, look, if you're talking about best friends that might be available, if everything fell the way I wanted it to, you could go to a whiteboard and draw out a strategy where you have the Big Ten picking up two schools, Notre Dame and Stanford. Then you have the SEC pick up four schools: North Carolina, North Carolina State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. That would leave the best football brands, ironically, left out, and they're not going to stay in a rump ACC. So they really have two choices. They can take what they have and try to rebuild, cobble together a 9-10 team league that includes some Big 12 teams, and say, this is what we can sell to CBS, and we're going to make X amount of dollars, and that's more than the current Big 12 could offer. That's what's going to end up happening. Either it's going to be one or the other. Either the Big 10's going to go to, the Big 12 is going to go to 20, and all three of the big conferences are going to be now at 20 schools. So you have 60 schools in three conferences, or you're going to have a fourth conference still together, which would be a reformed ACC that has, like I said, 8 to 10 schools in it, and that's the best 8 to 2 brands that are still available, and you're still looking at 4 power leagues.
Got 120 people watching, but you're scattered all over the place. We would love to have you on YouTube where you can participate in the comments section in the chat. So we love it that we're reaching people on Twitter and on Facebook, but just keep in mind that you can join us right here on YouTube and subscribe to the Voice of College Football. Of course, check out Nathan's show at College Football Mafia. We'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but I was interested in the comment made here by Minnie, not necessarily to us, but she brings up cultural fit. And I'll say it this way, Nathan, and again, then you can take it from here, is that after Texas A&M, Missouri to the SEC and some of the other moves that were made
Right.
a decade plus ago, Utah, of course, to the Pac-12 at that point, and Colorado from the Big 12, there still seemed to be geography that made sense and cultural fit that made sense. Now, I'm not going to say the cultural fit doesn't matter anymore, but man, it's been reduced 90% over what it used to mean. And by cultural fit, you almost consider that to be more of, the heavy hitters just kind of, staying in the same club rather than what I would have considered a cultural fit years ago, which was more about geography, styles of play,
Yeah.
like academic institutions, those sorts of things.
Well, certainly that's what the Pac-12 was built on, right? The Pac-12 was built on exactly all the ideals you just elucidated, and yet they were tied to a single region. And modern day football is played coast to coast. And the Pac-12 refused to do a merge with the ACC. They could have done that. They refused to move east by picking up the best brands out of the Big 12, and they said we're going to stay in our silo because we know we're that good, and we're just better than everybody else, and you guys have to play in the Rose Bowl at least once a year, so we're just going to sit in our silo and we'll be fine. Well, it didn't work out that way, and now you have to have coast to coast conferences unless you're the SEC, and everybody needs to play big. And so I think the cultural fit thing is still real. I do believe that that resides more in the Big Ten than the SEC, but regardless, either one of those conferences is driving the bus. So they can go up and say, okay, we don't care so much about the academic alliance stuff. We just want to have the best football brands, and now you're into a super league. The minute they decide they don't have those requirements, now we're talking a bipolar world, and the SEC will take the best football brands available, and the Big Ten would take the next best or reverse that, and they're going to have 24, maybe I don't want to say 30, but let's say 24 teams a league, and then everybody else would be playing something else. I don't think there's a reason why they would go any bigger. There's no reason to. You have 48 teams. And that's pretty good Super League. You and I could pick 48 teams and put together a pretty good football league, and they wouldn't lose anything by not having the other schools in it. So at this point today, the only thing that's stopping the world from going into that Super League bicameral type situation is if the Big Ten throws out the water, baby with the bathwater, and just says we want to be the best football conference. To do that, we're going to pick up the best football brands.
Okay, so that partially answers my next question, because I know once this started to move around about 3 to 4 years ago, my thought was once a few moves were made and the Big Ten countered the SEC's initial move with Oklahoma and Texas, I thought this appears to be a situation where one of two things moves these conferences. Either, number one, they evaluate the field and say, this brand, this program, this school can help us, therefore we're going to go after them, or we need to keep up with them. So if everything stays the same, we're not going to move. But if the SEC is going to go grab two more superpowers, then we may counterpunch that where we otherwise would not have.
Sure. I mean, that could happen. I don't think we're in a world where that's happening anymore, though. I think the major pickups were the mid region schools. When Missouri, when Nebraska, when Oklahoma and Texas all decided to go either which way, I think that really sort of blew up the idea that in that moment, they could have put together two giant conferences that would have had the best football brands in each one. I don't think we're there any longer. I think the confusion in the ACC has lasted long enough that schools are looking around and saying maybe we have other options. Maybe it's not just a 0 or 1 choice. Maybe we can build a third choice out there. And in my opinion, that third choice would be the Big 12. Now, between you and me, I think it would be great for the Big 12 to step up and say we have a bunch of private equity money. Let's go out and get the best brands we can from the ACC and establish ourselves as that first 20 league conference. That hasn't happened yet, and that has to be something we ponder about. Is it the money? Is it the buyout amount for the ACC that's just even 168 or whatever it was is too much? That surprises me because that money to me seems easily affordable, especially if you bring in private equity. So what's stopping it? I don't know. There's different ideas. In the Big 12, I'm hearing rumblings that there are some schools that don't want to tie themselves down to a private equity type deal that would last 10 years. They don't want to be stuck in the Big 12, which is a lot different than being stuck in by the gore. Everybody needs to understand if a conference brings in private equity, they will hold your feet to you're not leaving. You're not going to leave. They bought a product. They invested in you. You are not leaving that conference for whenever that is. It's a lot different than being tied to the gore and then being able to buy yourself out. It doesn't work that way with private equity. So that has to be overcome in the Big 12 area. At the same time, if I'm the Big 10, do I really want to go past 18 or 20 schools? Or if I'm the SEC, do I even want to move from 16? I don't know that I necessarily do. They're making a gaggle of money right now. Why would they want to try to share that with anybody else that's not worth what their current schools are? So it's a crazy world right now, Mark, and it's been really fun to track all of it.
Yeah, it has been. And there's one other major player out there that's different than the rest. And we'll leave you with this one, Nathan, if you can give us some kind of analysis of Notre Dame, not necessarily where they're going to wind up. That might be too much to ask of you, but what factors could be involved to figure out if Notre Dame is going to be forced to go somewhere or is going to be attracted so much somewhere that they're finally going to make that move?
If they did, it would be to the Big Ten. I don't think there's a question about that. There's regionality. There is culture fit up there. There's the educational properties, AAU, and all that stuff. But I'm of the mind, and I'd like to hear your opinion too. But I don't think Notre Dame joins the conference. I don't see why they should. They are bringing in so much money, being successful on their own. They don't have to share it with anybody. They get to drive all of their own TV stuff, so they can dictate the games they play. They're always on national television. I cannot think of a reason why Notre Dame would join a conference.
Exactly. So, me personally, as a football fan, and me as somebody who wants the best for the game of college football, believes that Notre Dame should be in a conference, but I don't blame Notre Dame. Notre
Yeah,
Dame's acting in its own best interest, much like the conferences themselves. They don't all do what's best for college. Of course, they're not doing what's best for college football. They're doing what's best for their own conference. And that's the biggest overall issue in this sport, is that there's no one to act on behalf of the sport.
right. Right. There's no czar, right? We need a czar, and we need to dragoon Bob Thompson out of retirement and have him come in and just tell everybody what to do and manage it from a very top down, collective type point. I don't know that we're ever going to get to that though. There's so many people involved in college athletics. I find it hard to believe we're going to ever get that unifying, especially in college football.